Hi guys, Russell here from homebrewrepublic.co.nz. How you going? We've got something really exciting today. I'm checking out my first ever Brick Road brewing kit. It's from their classic range and it's an IPA. Plus, for this review, we're doing something really different. We're attempting a clone recipe for one of my favorite brews, the Panhead Supercharger APA. Let's get into the video. Hey guys, Russell here from homebrewrepublic.co.nz. Welcome to today's brew review. Particularly excited about this brew for a couple of reasons. Number one, as I've already said, it is my first time having a crack at a Brick Road beer kit. Number two, I'm attempting a clone recipe for one of my favourite brews. It's one that I've wanted to do for a while. Generally speaking, my biggest problem in brewing is having a list of more brews that I want to do than time I have to brew them or drink them, really. So a couple of things in this review. First of all, a bit of an intro to the Brick Road kits. Number two, having a chat about the Panhead Supercharger APA, which we're attempting to clone. But then more or less we'll get into it and do some brewing. So, Brick Road. Brick Road were launched in the New Zealand market last year, probably maybe around June, but what I would say is they've had an exceptionally good response in the market. As a general rule, the feedback that we get from our brewers or the brewers in our community on these kits has all been positive, both in terms of the quality of the malts and the extracts inside, and more importantly in terms of the finished product that they produce. So today we're working with an IPA from the classic range. So two core ranges inside Brick Road. One is the classic range, one is the craft range. Classic range in this case is the IPA, and what the description on this kit is a West Coast IPA kit that comes complete with American ale yeast. It has a fresh, clean mouthfeel from hopped ale malts. So pretty generic, but what I really like about these kits, and I assume, well, this will be consistent for the classic range, I assume will be on the craft range as well, is on the back, it actually gives us some options. So this is an IPA kit, but there's a couple of different ways we could pull this, right? We could go for a classic American pale ale or an American IPA. We could look towards an Australian IPA. We could look towards a New Zealand IPA. Then within that as well, we could also look towards full strength IPAs, both in terms of their malt profile and in terms of their hop character. We could look towards a mid-strength IPA, or we could look towards a session IPA. We would also be looking for a slightly lower ABV. And what is on the back of these kits, which I think is so awesome, is the options of how you would achieve that, both in terms of the additional malt products you'll use, how much hops, or specifically what hops you might consider using, whether it's the classic American hops, Australian style hops, or Kiwi style hops, and also how much water you might add to the brew. One of the biggest things I've always said about brewing is even when you're brewing with kits, there is so much room in terms of the process variables and the additional ingredient variables that we can use as brewers to make the style of brew we want, or brews to our own personal preferences. And I think this really brings that to life, and it's a really cool feature of these kits. So thumbs up, Brick Road on that front. I already mentioned we're going to be doing something different in this review. We're going to be attempting a clone recipe. So what we want to be doing is using the classic IPA kit, which I've just introduced, and seeing if we can produce something that is similar to, in terms of its flavour profile and its characteristics, as this guy right here. So the Panhead Supercharger APA has an ABV of 5.7%. It's one of my favourite brews in the rare occasions where I happen to not be drinking homebrew. So if I'm out somewhere Obviously can't take my home brew into a bar, tend not to like that. But this would be one of the first brews I look forward to see if I can get hold of. And in general, for me personally, how I would describe it is a probably a new age or a modern style American pale ale. I jumped onto Panhead's website, so from their perspective, how they describe this is pale ale nailed, and I typically agree with that. Tropical front hops with a famously balanced bitterness and light malt riding quietly on the back, and I think that's a really fair and really perfect description of this. It's some big hoppy flavours on the front, as they talked about, particularly the tropical fruits, but also the piney and the citrus notes coming through with a beautiful light malt character on the back. I did go and find just look at some reviews around the place, and I found one which I also thought was another really good description of the brew. And it says, this beer is well known for its bold hop profile, combining a mix of American hops that deliver vibrant citrus and pine flavours, typical of an APA style. The Supercharger APA stands out with its bright, fruity notes balanced by a solid malt backbone that adds a touch of sweetness to offset the hop bitterness. The beer has garnered a following for its full-flavoured yet balanced approach, making it a standout example of the American pale ale style brewed in New Zealand. Exceptionally flattering of this brew, but I think is a good example of why this is one of my favourites. Back to the kit, but let's start talking more specifically about the brew that we're making today. I am going to jump back a very small step to why I think these kits and why Brick Road is doing really, really well. One of the reasons they're doing well. What I think they've done is produced a really modern and fresh range of styles. IPA arguably is a classic style, but if we look across their range broadly, it is on trend and on point styles. There's a second thing that I think they've done really, really well and that they're investing a lot of effort into at the moment, and it's publishing recipes for us as brewers to follow. Now, the Supercharger APA is one of those examples. So I've got this recipe from them. I am making one small modification, which I'll talk to you about. Interestingly, and you can find this recipe on their site, so go and check it out. I think it's brickroadbrewing.co.nz. If I have that slightly wrong for some reason, embarrassingly of course, just chuck Brick Road Brewing into Google and they will pop up. What I would say is they've actually published two versions of this recipe. One version was the IPA kit from the classic range, and the second version was using a kit from their craft range. Now, the craft range kits also include a craft yeast and hops, and my initial inclination was to use the craft range kit, and when I spoke to the guys at Brick Road, they said actually we would be, if what we want to do is go for a true clone, we would be better off coming down to the classic range recipe. And the reason they gave is that the Panhead doesn't actually use the Cascade hop, whereas the Cascade hop was included with the craft range kit. So essentially in using this, we've got a little bit more flexibility over the hops and therefore the flavours are coming through, hopefully to give us a closer finished product to the Panhead Supercharger APA. So, $1 million question, what are we actually doing? Of course, we're going to use this kit right here. Next up, we've got our malt. We are going to use 1.5 kgs of the ultra light liquid malt extract and a further kg of ultra light dry malt extract. They are going into this brew. Last but certainly not least, we have our dry hops that are going into this brew. Now, what I believe to be the standard hops that are actually used in the Panhead Supercharger APA are Citra, Simcoe and Centennial. So we're going to be following that model. We have in our hot little hands right here 100 grams of Simcoe hops, 100 grams of Centennial hops, and here is the one variation that I'm going to be making away from the recipe actually published by Brick Road Brewing. Brick Road Brewing suggested using Citra. Again, American hop, and again I actually believe is used in that Panhead bottle. What I am going to be using is Galaxy. It is what I have to hand. However, Galaxy is also commonly referred to as the Citra of Australia. So very, very similar flavour profile that's going to be coming through there in terms of the tropical fruit notes and in terms of the citrus notes on the end of that. Other than that, I'm going to say too much talking, not enough brewing. Let's just get into this brew. See you on the other side. Done. Hey guys, welcome to the garage. Got the brew here. Gonna open it up and get this yeast in. That's in the red pack. That other liquid there, didn't talk about this before, is a yeast nutrient. First time giving that a go. The general consensus is, at least from what I've seen around in the forums, it does help. Improves yeast health in the brew and the overall quality of fermentation. Let's get these lids off and get the yeast pitched. Here we are, guys. Okay, yeast, safe ale, US 05. Pitched, done. One thing I really like about that yeast, it's a really, really awesome yeast to use. It is particularly well suited to ales and American style ales, but it will work in any style of beer. I like the fermentation temperature range, which on this packet was 18 to 26 degrees ideal, which is a really, really nice temperature range for anyone who is fermenting in ambient temperatures. Right, yeast nutrient, done. Right guys, we'll get this lid on. Next time I see you, we'll be pitching hops, which will be done in 2 rounds. Here we are, day 4, first round of hops. What we have there, hop sock, sanitized. 150 grams of hops, which is in equal portions, 50 grams each. Simcoe, Centennial, and instead of Citra, using Galaxy. Let's get this lid off and get these hops in. Check that out. Beautifully active fermentation. Gonna have a quick smell. Honestly, smells really good. Okay, here comes our hops. Here we go, hop sock. Now, what you can see there, unscented dental floss. So we're just going to leave that off the edge when we put the lid back on, and that's going to allow us to pull the hop sock out. Okay, so this is a bit different to what I'd normally do. If you watch my other videos, you know that I normally go commando. So the reason I have used the hop sock in this case and used the dental floss is so that in 4 days time or 3 days time I can pull these hops out. For now I'll get this lid on and I'll see you in a few days for the next round. Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. Officially day 9. Not quite on the schedule, but we can roll with that. What I've got down there, second round of hops, which is same as before, Centennial, Mosaic and Galaxy. Sorry, that went from my head. 50 grams of each, so 150 all up. I mentioned day 9. We, according to the instructions, without going back and looking at them, I think the first round of hops was meant to go in day 4, out at day 7. In my case, not quite on instructions, first round went in day 5, so a day late, coming out day 9, so they've been in a day longer. But let's open up that lid and check out what's going on inside. Have a look-see at that. That is still well and truly still fermenting. Smells of the bee's knees. So let's get this deal done. What I'm going to do, second round of hops, and same deal, hop sock, bit of dental floss, and then what I'm going to do, because we used a little bit of dental floss, there you go, bit of a sneak peek of that brew over there, looks pretty good, nice colour. Alright, this one coming out. Alright, what I'm going to do, he is going to come, here we go, those hops go in the compost bin. Trick for young players, that hop sock, don't wash it in the washing machine. You don't want that anywhere near any kind of soap that has like odours and perfumes in it. So stick with your like cold water detergent, which is designed for brewing or similar. Right, so what we got here is second round of hops. This is very much still fermenting. I'm an ambient, but we can see it, and when I smell, I can really get that fizziness. From memory, the hops were meant to stay in day 7 through day 10, with the expectation fermentation was done on day 10. This is day 9, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave these hops in probably maximum 4 days, unless fermentation finishes first. Because I can see so much activity, like I said, day 9, I'm going to leave this alone for 3 days, day 12, until I take my first gravity reading. But I wouldn't at this point be surprised if we're going longer than 12 days. Probably won't. Now, last steps on this, once fermentation is finished, which will be defined as gravity being constant for 2 to 3 days. Actually, I'll step this back. So either way, what I'm going to do, day 13, if not before, going to take these hops out. Day 12, I'll start testing for end of fermentation. You testing gravity, 2 to 3 days constant. Once fermentation is over, this will be getting cold crashed. I've brewed this ambient because I've got another brew in my fridge, which has taken way longer than expected, but I think he's almost ready now. So he'll be out by the time this is finished. So I'll get these hops out. Like I said, I'll get fermentation finished. I am going to add findings to this. I am going to cold crash. After that, I will rack off into my bottling bucket and bottle. At which point, I will see you guys in 8 weeks for the official taste test. Catch you then. Cheers. Welcome back to the official taste test for our first ever Brick Road brew. It is, of course, the Brick Road Classic IPA, and you know that we did this a little bit differently. From the beginning, we went for a recipe brew, and we We're going after a clone recipe for the Panhead APA Supercharger. So by now you're sitting there going, come on, get on with it. What did we get? So here we go. Here's the bottle, fresh out of the fridge. Good little pop. Alright, bottle, glass. Pouring. Man, oh man, check this out. There we go, guys. One very beautiful, beautiful brew. Exceptionally happy. With how this has come out. Okay, so look, first Brick Road brew, and the first thing I'm going to say is super impressed with the Brick Road brand and the Brick Road kits. I think they've done a phenomenal job of bringing a quality product to the market. I said earlier in this video that the market and brewers have really got behind Brick Road, and for really good reason. They're a New Zealand brand, which I think straight away is a good reason to really get behind them. They're locally owned, they're a challenger brand, which I think is really cool, but their products come through with the quality. So yeah, good brewing. Okay, but back to the taste test. What I would say, overall, I think it's the tropical notes that kind of come off the top that I pick up. Going into the taste, we start to get some of the more, yes, tropical, but the citrus and pine notes that we are accustomed to, particularly coming through from those classic American hops, the Centennial, and what was the third one? Ah man, I should remember, but I don't, I'm sorry. Okay, and a really, really nice malty backbone. And overall, solid brew. So how I feel about this, two parts to that answer. We were going for a clone recipe of the Panhead APA. So how do we go against delivering a clone? I don't think it's come out as close as I would have liked to call it a clone. So if I think about a clone, I want to be able to go, there's a couple of twins standing over there, or those people are definitely from this, related, they're from the same family. Definitely from the same kind of style and the same neighbourhood, but not close enough for me to be called a clone. I think part of that, if I was to go what's missing, part of that comes from the flavour profile. Noting that I did step away from the suggested recipe, so that could well be part of it. I used Galaxy instead of Citra, but that shouldn't have made too much of a massive difference. I feel like this beer has a little bit more body than what the Supercharger does as well. It's definitely a medium bodied brew, but very, very smooth. As a standalone brew though, whilst I don't think this has come out as strongly as I would have liked to call it a clone, it has come out as a very, very good brew in its own right. So, like I said, really nice, juicy, hop-forward flavour profile, the tropical, the citrus, the pine, and a really nice malt backbone and an incredibly smooth body, albeit a medium body rather than a light body. And an exceptional brew. One thing that I did that was interesting is I shared this brew with a gentleman by the name of John. Now John is the person, the man, the name, the face behind Brick Road. And it was a really interesting experience. So I got the opportunity to catch up with John and have a conversation with him, and we've actually captured that conversation on video, so keep an eye out over the next 1 to 2 weeks because we're going to be dropping that as a feature. And essentially what we did was we had the opportunity to sit down and find out what the background was behind Brick Road, what the vision was for Brick Road, where John really wanted to see it go in the market, what he really wanted to do for brewers. So we talked about all that, we talked about brewing in general, we talked about a lot of things. But we actually shared this brew. And John is also a certified beer judge. I knew that before I went in, so slightly nervous about taking my humble homebrew out to someone who has as much experience tasting and brewing beer as John. If I give his spin on it, and I'll share, I'll paraphrase the comments he gave me, but I'll caveat his comments with two things. Number one, it is by no way an endorsement specifically of Homebrew Republic or of this brew. Number two, the comments I have from John were shared informally, so they weren't given to me as structured feedback. It was an informal conversation, and like I said, the conversation was recorded, so you can go check that out in a couple of weeks when it drops. Overall, the general sentiment from John was that this came out as a really, really good brew. One of the specific comments that he made was that this brew, as it is in the glass, was better than a lot of the brews that he judges. And on that, so I'll take the compliment because I was really proud of that. I do make the assumption that that is in the context of amateur brewing, so I'm not attempting to compare this to something that's come from a professional brewery. And the other thing I want to take from that, and that I'd want to give all brewers out there, is that it is possible to make really, really good beer with extract brewing kits, and I think that's really cool. That's what it's about. For me anyway, and like I've always said, it's, for me, a big part of brewing is about making good beer that my friends and family will happily drink with me, and I think that's proof in the pudding that it's possible and it's real, which is really cool. There was some constructive feedback in there though as well. So there were two specific comments that John gave me about this brew. One of them was the hop profile. So he asked me what the hop bill was in there and how much in particular, and we put 300 grams of hops. So John's comment was that the hop profile had fallen away a bit too much for the relative to the volume of hops that we put into this brew, and that with the knowledge of the level of hops in there, it should have had a bigger profile as we were drinking it. And I think that's a fair comment. The other good thing about that was that we had a very small discussion around what might have caused that, and John's immediate suggestions and where the conversation kind of immediately went was around potentially oxidization in the brew being a contributing factor to the hop profile falling away. One of the key things we talked about was the points at which I put hops in the brew. Bearing in mind this was all within an informal conversation. And I guess the other side of this, which was acknowledged at the same time, is that home brewing is an imperfect process. And I have talked about oxidation before and the need to avoid it. And it's not, in a home brewing environment, it's especially when you're bottling, it's not possible to completely remove oxidation. It's possible to minimise it, but not remove it. But I think listening to John, the thought in the back of my mind is how do I personally review my process steps so that I can look to minimise the potential or the exposure to oxidisation even further than what I have now, was really my thinking. And so there's a broader process thing there. One of the things that John specifically gave us was his view was introduce dry hops into the brew earlier rather than later. So my standard go-to is day 4 and 8. And even, I'm pretty sure it was either this brew or the other Brick Road brew I did, I was running late and I did it on day 5 and 9. John's distinct advice, and he had quite a firm or a clear view here, was go early, even to the point of going day 3 for first introduction. there are considerations to going early in terms of considering how the fermentation process reacts with the hop and how that might affect flavour profile. But despite that consideration, John's view was that we were probably better for it to minimise the oxidation. So I guess in saying all that, I'm sharing what I was told in that sense. I haven't formed, I think my takeaway was definitely some things that I want to think about and play around with changing is probably where I got to on that. The other one that John said, which was a really interesting one, and it's funny because I hadn't really thought about this beforehand, but as soon as he said it, I was like, yeah, it is actually. He said that the brew had a little bit more sweetness coming through from the malt than we might expect from this brew. And like I said, it's not something I particularly noticed before, but as soon as he said it, I was like, yeah, actually there is. Where that came from, and he immediately said that would suggest we need to look at how we improve attenuation. And if we put that in really, really simple terms, attenuation has the fermentation process consumed all of the available fermentation sugar, or the sugars that are able to be converted in the fermentation process, because if we leave those in, then we're going to get that residual sweetness. If we have optimized the fermentation process and consumed all of those sugars, we'll get a drier finish. And that we did talk in the conversation the same way we talked about the hops. My question was, well, what suggestions would we look at? And John's reply was that one's a little bit more complex. There are a number of other elements in the wider process, as well as the yeast, that could have affected that. But again, what I take from that is agree with the comment, and just left me in a point where opportunity to think about the process overall and how I might move to improve that. One of the things that John did say was around yeast, and actually two things on the yeast. Number one was the volume of yeast that was used, and his guidance was don't be shy to use more yeast than what comes with the kit. I think there is some caution there because we're stepping into dosage rates of yeast, and there are potential problems with overdosing yeast. So I think for me, one of the things I'd want to do is just have a look at what suggested dosage rates are and how they might apply to different styles, as well as obviously using style appropriate yeast. I would note with these kits is that they come with 7.5 grams of yeast, which is slightly more than some other kits on the market, and for good reason, just lifting up the volume of yeast in terms of dosage rate into the brew. The other thing that John said, which isn't something I've typically done, I've typically ignored in favour of simplicity, is rehydrating yeast before pitching. Have always known about it, have broadly known about the benefits, but yeah, have overlooked it in favour of simplicity. But I think that's probably one of the first things I'll look at reviewing, because it's one of the easier changes to make and see how we go. Bearing in mind as well, and as I talk about all these possible things to try, I've got another at least 3 brews that are already done and bottled. One's in the fermenter now. So I'll be getting through those brew reviews before you see any of those kind of changes come through on the channel. Shared this pretty widely with friends. Really, really good feedback. It was well enjoyed, and I think it's a little bit heavier. Like I said, it's got the medium, what I feel is, albeit very smooth, it does head towards having a medium body. It does have a little bit kick in the alcohol level, ABV, so less of a session beer, and but it's been a really awesome beer over winter and over autumn. I'm now right on the tail end of winter, and I've been really enjoying this through winter. So, like I said, favourable comments through from my friends to the same effect. So that pretty much sums up this brew, and like I said, didn't come out as close as I would have wanted to call it a clone recipe, but as a standalone beer came out as a really, really good brew, to the degree that I'm going to publish this as a recipe on our site, homebrewrepublic.co.nz. Now, what I've done with the knowledge that it didn't come out as close as I wanted to for a clone recipe, I have named it the Ignition IPA, and I've chosen the name Ignition because in my mind it is themed after the Panhead Supercharger APA, so I wanted to stick with that kind of supercharger kind of theme, which to me I relate to V8 supercars. So how I would describe this brew is a West Coast style IPA that offers big and bold hoppy experience. The classic American hops drive the familiar pine and citrus flavours, while the Galaxy hop adds a distinctive tropical twist. A light malt backbone rides smoothly in the background, leading to a touch of sweetness to balance the assertive hop bitterness. Sounds pretty good, right? Exactly what this is to me. Okay, so what have we been up to? We've been up to a lot. Straight on the back of doing this brew, I actually brewed a second brew of these. What I did, this brew was, like I said, a bit of a heavier brew. So what I wanted to do was go for kind of a New Zealand style IPA. I also wanted to go for a session brew. So I wanted to pair back to a lighter body. So what I did was this kit. This brew was done using liquid malt, quite a lot of malt, liquid malt extract and dry malt extract. With that other brew, I only used liquid malt. And the hop we used in that was the Riwaka hop, New Zealand Riwaka. It's come out outstandingly. I'm super happy with that brew. It's very different to this, but is a very, very enjoyable brew. I think that really hit the mark. That will be one of the next 2 brew reviews that I do. The brew review coming, I'm not sure which one of these comes next. It's either the Everyday IPA or it's going to be the Stout. So you'll remember a couple of brews back I did a coffee cream stout. I wasn't completely happy with how that came out. That said, I liked it enough to get another brew straight on. One of my big learnings out of that first brew was around looking harder at dosage rates on lactose, and I actually ended up publishing some content as a resource on our site, so feel free to check that out. Again, homebrewrepublic.co.nz, and there's some guidance there on dosage rates to use for low, medium and high. In the second stout that I did, I didn't use lactose, so I steered away from lactose and went just for the malt and coffee, and I think it's come out exceptionally. Like, I'm so happy with it. It came out a lot better than my first brew, which is just part of the trial and error of finding what works for us as individual brewers, what we like, what our preferences are. So that's super cool. I think, and going back on what I said before, I think what I'll do is for the next brew review, I'll pick up the Everyday IPA based on this kit right here. Then I'm going to drop the stout recipe. The reason I hold the stout off is because November, can't remember the exact date, the first week of November is International Stout Day. So I'm going to drop that brew review in November for International Stout Day, which is nicely timed. Now, the brew that I have in the fermenter, which I'm super excited about, I picked up a Black Rock Pale Ale, which is one of the go-to pale ale kits. It's a popular kit on our site. I've done that with liquid brewing sugar. I think liquid brewing sugar, and I then used cold steeped grains. And so on that video, I will share with you the process I went through for cold steeping. I'll share the exact grains that I used and the outcome. I did dry hop it as well. dry hops in. I actually put dry hops in this week, so that brew is moving on nicely in the fermenter. So that is all that is coming up and a lot of what's been going on. I've also got I've actually done my first 2 wines. That's been a super cool experience. All this said, if you've watched this far, thanks. I really appreciate it. What I'm going to say is remember to check out our site, homebrewrepublic.co.nz. Track down the Facebook group, Homebrew Republic Kit Brewers. It's on Facebook. There's a really great bunch of people in there. And thank you. So, until next time, happy brewing. Cheers.
Cheers.